Hi.
Evening, Richard.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Not too bad yourself.
Doing all right. So, any fun questions or things you might want to ask? Because I know you typically have to leave a little early.
Yeah, I do. One thing I was kind of thinking about what I remember it was the Assyrian War with or at least the air war in 82. And then there were you had the what are the Maronites, you had the Israelis occupying the very southern part. And I remember at the time people talking about Lebanon being kind of like a Syrian colony, that, this, what nothing happened in Lebanon without Syria saying yes, yes to it. And at the time, it was kind of considered, well, it'll always be like this. And I'm kind of curious, obviously it wasn't. So, it did, and they did become somewhat independent.
Somewhat is the strong is the word here.
Yeah.
A lot of what you've talked about is actually sort of an overview of what we're going to cover tonight in the next 2 hours.
Okay, cool.
So that, yeah, we're going to talk about Israel's invasion of Lebanon, what that resulted in terms of securing or not securing the viability of the Lebanese government, sort of the collapse of central state authority with Syrian agitation, and the Syrian creation of a post-war Lebanon, and then the Lebanese, let's say, discovery about 25 years later that they should be independent, and how that works or not, or yeah. And I think that your memory is sort of spot on here, that when Israel invaded, it really put a fundamentally different outlook on the war, because as much as Bashir Gemayel had some kind of relationship with Israel, and it was a relationship where both of the sides seemed to want to be using the other. I think the Israelis were a little bit more hopeful about who Gemayel was than Gemayel was in terms of his utility of them. But with his assassination, it ultimately led to the peace treaty that was being contemplated being rushed. And accordingly, the peace treaty was still born when it came out, the peace treaty between Lebanon and Israel. And because Israel didn't withdraw, it gave Syria a very clear argumentation in much of the rest of the Lebanese circles of Israel's an existential threat to Lebanon, and we are the lesser threat. So you end up seeing more factions defecting to the Syrian side, and the Syrians being able to overwhelm, for want of a better term, Maronistan, right? The country controlled by uh, the Maronite Lebanese forces. And so when the Syrians were able to prevail on that, they introduced their entire state security system to Lebanon, which effectively made Lebanon a satellite state of Syria. And that came undone when the threat from Israel really vanished. Because in 2000, Israel completely withdrew from all Lebanese territory, as certified by the United Nations. We're going to get into the wrinkles in that. But because Israel had completely withdrawn, then the argument for Syrian control of Lebanese politics sort of evaporated. And as a response to certain political factors, we'll go into that, the Cedar Revolution happened, and the Lebanese basically became free. And as for the question if Jordan is a democracy or a kingdom, it is both. It is a kingdom, and it's a constitutional monarchy, and it has a parliament that is elected by the population. There's a significant portion of Jordan's population who aren't citizens and therefore don't vote in the election, but the Chamber of Deputies, for what little power they have, are elected. It is a democracy. It's just not a democracy where the deputies have a lot of power to actually change policy. Jordan experimented with that, and we'll actually talk a little bit about that next week, around the year 1950s. But generally speaking, Jordanian policy tends to be rather strongly controlled by the king. Anyway, we are at our magic hour, so let's begin. Hi, and welcome to episode 74 of